Okay, people, my next guest on Just for Sport is Mark Stern. He's a producer extraordinaire for the Tony Kornheiser Show. He's made quite a career for himself, beginning with his first job down in Atlanta during the 1996 Olympics. He's been talent for the US Open, that's the Grand Slam tennis tournament, not the golf. And he's on one of the most successful podcasts in America that he's producing and working with Tony Kornheiser. It's a pretty cool gig. We talk about a lot of things: sports, when it will return, specifically tennis. We also talk about his cross-country travels, seeing baseball, one of his other favorite pastimes. And because he is from Boston, he's a Patriots fan, what it was like to see Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski go to Tampa. Tough time for him, sort of. Okay, but first, we begin by talking with the civil unrest that is going on right now in America after the killing of George Floyd, and what it's like to not only be going through that as a society, but doing it during a very, very serious pandemic. This is normally a sports show, but we got a lot to get into that's not sports related. This is Just for Sport for the Props Network in 3, 2, 1. All right, Mark, thank you for giving me some time. I really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jamoki. It's great to be on with you, man. This is I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be good to chat with you.
And it's been a long time since we did the City Open Wildcard Challenge, but still we're in warm weather at least. I hope you can say the same. It's been warm.
Yeah. Gosh, that seems like it was like 10 years ago. With everything that's been going on, literally like the month of January and like the Super Bowl, doesn't it feel like that was played like a decade ago?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's just been so many things have happened from the pandemic to the killing of George Floyd and now the protests that have been going on for over a week. And to go right into it, I don't want to start on such a somber note, but it's really important for, I think, to understand in many ways the different contexts is where everyone's coming from, what they think of what's happening today. But what has it been like for you living in DC for the past week? Because you're not just in it, like we are, Laura, to an extent, but you're kind of in the epicenter with it being the nation's capital and where our president of the United States sits.
It's been strange. In a word, I don't want to say it's been frightening for me because fortunately where I live, it hasn't really impacted my neighborhood. I probably live a few miles from the White House, but in DC, traffic-wise, that's about 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, I have been, one of the things I like to do is I like to jog, and I start down by the Georgetown waterfront. And for those who don't know, that you go on this path that leads you right by the Watergate, the Kennedy Center, and then you can cruise up through the mall and the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. It's a gorgeous run.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, over the weekend when I was doing that, I couldn't tell any signs of anything going on. It really was isolated around the White House area in Lafayette Square. And then it started to bleed into some other neighborhoods. And I went jogging yesterday and I saw the presence of the military there. Very light presence, and everybody very respectful and not sort of in your face with guns. I saw the graffiti that was being erased on the Lincoln Memorial. And actually, by the time I looped back, the graffiti was all gone. And of course, driving through Georgetown, and if you see a bunch of stores that are boarded up, a bunch of businesses. And I saw that again this morning, driving through Friendship Heights and into Bethesda, where you saw an awful lot of stuff boarded up. But I didn't really see any damage. Now, what that could mean is maybe some stuff got broken into, and this is boarded up after the fact, or it might have been preventative. But it's just weird to see that it's almost like when you see those stories of, somewhere in Florida or in the Carolinas, a hurricane's hitting, and you're like, when you're in the middle of that, you're like, oh my gosh, everybody's got their eyes on us, and we're in the middle of the storm. And it does feel strange that that's going on. The violence breaks my heart, because what I genuinely hope with all of this is that the violence doesn't detract from the larger, much more vital, important message, is that there needs to be drastic reforms, in my opinion, both in the Justice Department and the way we handle the police, the way the police are trained, the way police are punished when they transgress. All of that, in my opinion, needs to be revamped and done with 21st century eyes to make sure that it's being done the right way and that everybody's being treated fairly. And that clearly doesn't seem to be the case right now.
And it has slowly built up from, now people are saying that, the protests and the injustices first and foremost, the racism first and foremost, that this is in some ways worse than 1968. Now that we've had more protests, that was more local. Obviously, I think a big part of that is media and social media have exacerbated and really been able to give everybody a platform to talk about their feelings and express where they are coming from and what they think about what's going on. And I noticed that, you talk about it as well on the show that you do with Tony Kornheiser, that the different guests you bring on, you come from different perspectives. I'm a black man. You are a white man. How has that affected you in trying to understand this problem? And I will say for mine, first and foremost, I think the part that makes it right on the base is that I can't change the color of my skin. I am who I am. And to hear anyone on any level talk about, how I may not understand what you're going through, but, something has to change. As you mentioned, what are you feeling when you see what's happening every day?
Well, let me just start off with how I felt when I saw the video of Mr. Floyd. And I think everybody, regardless of skin color, if they have any kind of heart, they felt the same. They were just aghast and really destroyed on some level that could happen in broad daylight. Look, you're right. I'm white. And obviously the way I interact with the world unconsciously is going to be different with the way the world interacts with me, rather, is probably different than it is for you. I've got a lot of friends of color and we talk all the time, and it's opened my eyes to a lot of things, like talking to people that are like, oh yeah, I try not to drive at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why? Because your eyes don't see well? He's like, no, because I'll get pulled over for no reason, just because of my skin color. And, the way I go through life and the way I was raised, I don't look at somebody's skin color. I don't look at their ethnicity. I look, or even their gender. I look at who they are and their actions. And so when people act in racist manners, it's so outside of my realm of thought. I'm like, why would you do that? If it's a good person, treat them well. If they're a bad person, steer clear of them, like don't deal with them. And what's become clear, obviously, as social media shows you these examples, particularly the such troubling stuff that you see with the police, with these repeated incidents of violence and really murder, in my opinion, against people of color. And it just leaves me so upset that it almost leaves you speechless that could actually go on. Because like I said, I like to think in a lot of ways that we're past a lot of stuff, and a lot of the race riots that went on in the 60s. You mentioned in 68. Certainly there was a lot of marches here in DC, and we all talked about Detroit and the Watts riots, but then you look up and you're like, well, it happened in 68. Then there were riots in the 80s and the 90s, and, and then again in Baltimore just a few years ago. There are systemic problems that need to be addressed to make sure that these things don't happen. And just for me, my instinct is always like, how can I help? But I'm not a person that marches. I'm not a person that sort of does that. I try and impact the world just in my own way around, and people can criticize me for that. That's more than welcome. But I do get scared of going to a protest and getting caught up in something where maybe there's some bad eggs there that really just want to tangle with the police. They throw some stuff at the police, and the next thing you know, the police march in and are starting to, really do damage to people. And so I try and steer clear of that. And as I said, just get my message across in the shows that I do and when I interact with people. And I really genuinely believe in committing acts of kindness and doing good every single day, even if, and I know people again are going to say this is inane, but like just holding the door for people or just being nice to people. I think we get lost in a lot of our own lives and our own world, that it's so busy and there's so many stress and so many things going on that we forget that we're neighbors to people.
Hmm.
Like, it's not hard to be nice to folks.
And it's interesting because you talk about opening a door for somebody, and that's civility. That's
Right.
a, that the first part of that is being civil. And we're talking about civil unrest right now that's due to racism. And I think there are some other ways you can give back between, donations and using your platform to
Sure.
express your concern, because you never know who's listening. Is for anybody who is watching this, if, you heard my intro, that Mark Stern is a big in many more ways than you know. And so for all the littles out there that get to hear what you have to say, and Tony and Wilbon and, everybody, Jeannie McManus, anybody who you can talk to, Chris Saliza, that they can hear what you have to say. You never know how it's going to impact or change someone's opinion. So, you do what you can.
Well, and that's when we talk about, the influence I can have on the show. Obviously, it's Tony's show.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing the lion's share of talking on the show. And also the character I play on it, for those that aren't aware, I'm Nigel, a British guy. And by the way, I'm sorry I'm wearing a hat. I haven't had my hair cut in like 3 months, and it's just out of control. So I have to wear a hat everywhere I go.
Everywhere I go.
That's why you can't see my eyes right now. But what I can do is suggest guests and topics to Tony, and some of them are very obvious, but we're very fortunate with the regulars on the show. Having Mike Wilbon on every single Monday. There's nothing I love more than listening to Michael Wilbon talk about anything. And he can do it with sports. He can do it with social things. When there's a passing of somebody, we haven't talked about Wes Unseld yet, but I know he's going to talk about that next Monday. He's just the best. And David Aldridge is right there with him. And to have guys like that be able to come on and talk about this, because again, I can see things through my eyes, but what you and I go through in life tragically is very different. And I wish it weren't that way. So what I love to do is get those guests and get those topics talked about on the show, and then really just sit back and soak it all in. I mean, it's like having a front row seat to a great play. And I get to hear Tony, who is, he's the smartest, funniest guy I have ever or will ever know. And all his instincts are so strong and so dead on. And it's just, we love to laugh and poke fun. Again, I'm playing a British guy on a show. I've been doing it for like almost 20 years. But when serious things happen, there's nobody better. And I think one of the greatest shows that Tony ever did was the shootings at not Charlottesville, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
We were on the air the next day. And it was, anytime there's something big like that happens, Tony strikes the right tone, brings the right people on. And it really is, it's a daily lesson for me. And I take a lot of my cues from Tony, from DA, and from Wilbon as well. And I'm only naming those few, but you're right. Gina McManus, Tori Clark, Chris Saliza, Chuck Todd. We're blessed with a lot of great folks on that show.
And for the most part, it's a sports show. And
yes, nominally, sports show.
Nominally. And yeah. And I think the thing is that, so often sports in general, when you go back to 9/11, it was a unifier. It was something that brought everyone together, rooting for your team, sometimes against the team. But it didn't matter where you came from, your race, socioeconomic status, your gender, age. And I wonder how much you are missing it. Not just as a game, because the beauty of where we are today, at least we do get to hear from the athletes on the subject matter of race right now. LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Dale Earnhardt Jr., people talking about how there is an injustice. But the game, I always thought is, we're missing it because of the pandemic. Now it's almost twice as bad, in that it isn't something where I could imagine a pregame speech of an athlete kind of galvanizing that small group, talking to them before the game starts. But the ripple effects of that when they go home and talk to their son or daughter or father or uncle about, wow, there were some poignant words that were made by Kevin Durant. Whatever the case may be, sports, we're really, really missing it now. And yes, there's a bigger picture of race, but maybe that is something that could have taken your mind off of it, or in some ways cleared it for you to be able to think.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and and you're dead on with all of it. Let me just start with the 9/11 reference. And back then, it really felt that was a unifying thing in a lot of ways. And wherever you went, certainly in the immediate aftermath, somebody cut you off in traffic, you gave a thumbs up. You're like, I'm right in this with you, brother. We're right there together. And the thing about the pandemic was, because you didn't know who had it, so you had to be careful of everybody, and then you're locked away by yourself. It's very isolating, and then you became mistrustful of people. And so that unifying thing that we had with 9/11, we didn't really have with the pandemic. And you bake into that all the dysfunction and the division that we faced in this country since Trump was elected. Really, the couple of years before that, it's just been it's just been, people have been at each other's throats, it feels like, day in and day out. And sports has a healing property. And there were a couple of things about 9/11 that were remarkable. One was, and I don't know if you remember, President Bush throwing out the first pitch.
Mm-hmm.
ESPN did a brilliant 30 for 30 on it. And I had forgotten about it and went back and watched it recently. And it gave me goosebumps. And it just gave me, you're so charged up. You're proud to be an American. You're like, yes, we're not letting these people bat us down. We're standing up proud, and this is what we do. And he went out there, and he threw a strike like right out of a Hollywood script. It was unbelievable. And the place went crazy. Now, let me ask you this. If we were in a similar situation and President Trump went to throw out a first pitch from somewhere, don't you think there'd be zero chance that he'd get that kind of reaction?
Yeah, that'd be tough. I mean, I think there's a reason why he's going in the other direction in the bunker than he is actually coming out in public.
Yeah, and that troubles me. And there was something other incredibly special about this. When people want to, poo-poo sports and say, oh, it's all only so much fluff, and I get that. This is not the UN. We're not, curing cancer, but it has a healing effect on people, and it has a calming effect on people in times of trouble. And the legendary, one of my favorite broadcasters of all time, the late great Jack Buck, gave it was really, he read like a poem really before the first pitch of that World Series when it resumed. And in essence, what it did was it gave the country permission to enjoy sports again, to enjoy their lives again. And we need something like that. And the fact that we don't have sports, or even as they're trying to get going again, we don't know if they're going to work. And with baseball, one of the sports I love maybe more than anything, it's become an argument over money. And you almost want like a figure to come out of a Hollywood movie, to be like, guys, we need to get out there for people. We need to entertain people. We need to be there for our country. This is what we do. This is important right now. We'll figure things out, but we got to get out on the field. And it doesn't seem like folks are having that attitude, certainly, with a lot of stuff right now.
Especially when we're dealing with an issue of race relations, and you've got billionaires and millionaires arguing over, how much money I can make. And I understand that there are two sides to it. Nobody's saying, taking a position one way or the other, as much as just saying there are bigger problems out there. And I know I'm saying that, but also saying that I think sports is something that people have used as a way to heal and be together and cheer, and be happy about something.
Yeah, we all need that in our lives. And there's a lot of different things. I mean, people could say, well, comedy shows aren't going on right now. When will they return? Or music concerts or something like that. But sports is a massive industry, and it's woven into the fabric of our lives. I mean, you go all the way back to the Romans for this, people love it. It unites them, and it gives them entertainment, and because we've all got stuff going on in our lives. and to have that distraction and lose yourself and see these unbelievable moments. I mean, when you see LeBron James do the things he does, you're like, oh my God, this guy's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it shows the ratings that the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance got. You know, I was enthralled by that. I wanted it to be 20 episodes. It was just so much fun to see that stuff again. And, you know, you talk about billionaires and billionaires quibbling over the dollars. You know, there's another issue that this country is facing among many, but it's the wealth gap, you know, and I think that's all baked into what we're seeing right now with the protests and some of the rioting that's spilling out from that. Is that I think there's a lot of people who are like, we don't have anything. We've been locked down for 3 months. We've lost jobs. Businesses have gone away. I'm terrified and completely uncertain about my future. And there's a whole class of people out there, the one percenters, you know, who are fine. And the wealth that they have compared to the rest, it's just appalling. And, you know, I'm not going to go into Marxism and say we need to redistribute wealth and everybody needs to be making the same. But I don't think it's out of line to say that the wealth gap that has gone on in this country and really the destruction of the middle class, I think is one of the biggest problems that we've got going on in the country. And I think it does add into the racism, because when people are uncertain about their futures, they react in much more different and hostile ways. And I think we're seeing a lot of that.
As it's almost become a perfect storm. And I
Yes.
hate using that word perfect because I feel like you say that in almost like a positive way, but it's like all of these forces are colliding at one time. And I don't know if you don't want to experience it in any way. You know, you'd like to not have to be in this position, but we are, and we're all trying to heal and, you know, and do better for mankind, and hopefully we can get there. And so going back to sports, a specific sport that you not only are a fan of, but you cover. We cover together City Open, Wild Card Challenge. You cover the City Open for years. You worked at the U.S. Open, the biggest tournament for tennis in the United States, and the best one, I might add. How much are you missing that? And why is there no plan for major tennis to come back? Yes, there have been some, you know, small tournaments here and there, but major tennis, grand slams, there's no plan for when it will return. And lastly, I might add, I thought it might be one of the first ones because you have to be quiet when they're playing anyway. So if there are no fans, it's like the players like the quiet anyway. And I know it's not a good thing to say about not having fans, but you know, that's one aspect of it.
I know what you're saying. And by the way, what fun it was to call that wild card match with you, man. That was good fun. And I've loved working at the City Open. I've been very lucky. My friend Scott Jackson, who also works that tournament and worked the US Open, worked it before me and then had a conflict one year and couldn't do it. So he knew I was a tennis nut, and I've been a tennis fan. I mean, I grew up watching Borg. I mean, I'm old, so, but you know, there's Borg, McEnroe, and Connors, and Nastasi, and Navratilova, and Everett. It was I really grew up in a golden age of tennis, and then we've seen another one with all the brilliant players today, with Serena, who's just unbelievably brilliant, and you know, Federer and Nadal and Djokovic. Listen, when the French Open was first, and they said, because they were first in the calendar, and they said, we're going to do this in October. I don't think they consulted with the U.S. Open and Wimbledon because I've read that those tournaments were like, well, what if we want to move to there?
Yeah.
What to talk about this stuff? But the French, being the French, are like, no, we're going to do it. All right.
Oh, the accent.
Yeah. But I don't even know if they're for certain whether they're going to be able to play it. Then the canceling of Wimbledon broke my heart. You know,
Yeah.
it's just it's one of my favorite sporting events of the entire year. There's a vast number of reasons why. Some of it is because it ties back into my childhood, watching it with my cousins over the summer, you know, waking up to watch these brilliant matches. And it just takes me back to a time of, you know, when sports were really pure, the pure enjoyment you get as a kid. And then, well, the good news is that the U.S. Open has not been canceled. The City Open has not been canceled. There are things being discussed. I think I've seen something that talked about chartering in players so they get them on a private plane, because the problem is everybody comes from all over the globe,
Right,
so
right.
it's really hard to quarantine folks when they're coming from every different country on the planet. But
Mm-hmm.
chartering planes is something I thought was a terrific idea if they can get around, the plane is sterile, you guys get on it, we're testing, you get here, and then you isolate the players, sort of like what they're talking to do with the NBA,
Yeah,
where they just
yeah,
pull them up in the compound at Disney, and once you get here, we should be good because we're not interacting with people. But the players have to get on board with it. There has to be aggressive testing, and they've got to figure out what to do with the media. The main role that I played at these tournaments is post-match interviewer, and I'm pretty sure players not going to want to talk to me when I'm sticking a microphone in his face.
yeah.
I don't want to get sick. So, and the thing about the fans, and you're right, it is like golf. It's very quiet. It's very quiet,
Mm-hmm.
but I I've heard the noise at the City Open during the championships, when the crowd is packed. I had never experienced anything in tennis like I had at Arthur Ashe Court. I mean, that was noise like I had not heard before. And seeing Coco Gauff,
Coco Golf.
yeah, she was playing in Louis Armstrong, and I had interviewed her at the City Open. And
Mm-hmm.
then they said, all right, you got to go down. She just won a doubles match, and she's going to, go up to the quarters or something like that. And I went down there, and I couldn't even hear myself. People were screaming so much for her. And I was like, first of all, I was like, how are you handling this at like, what are you, 17?
Yeah.
I'm freaked out. I'm in my 50s.
Was she like 15, right?
Yeah, she's,
14,
by the way,
15?
she is a superstar in the making. I mean, in every level, she's so poised. Like, this is a kid handling
Mm-hmm.
interviews like she's a 20-year veteran, and her talent, I cannot wait to see her career like blossom. She's
Yeah.
going to win not one major, she's going to win multiple majors, and I think she's going to be great for the sport. I really, really do. So, those are the things that they have to figure out. Because I know they haven't canceled it because the reason they haven't canceled it is they're desperately looking for any way they can
Mm-hmm.
to keep this tournament going. You know, it would be vastly different without the fans. Have you been up to the U.S. Open? Have you seen it up there?
No, so you know what? The worst story that I can think of my memory of the U.S. Open is my dad and I were saying we were going to go this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember why, and we said no. And we were going to buy tickets that would have had that first, what was it, Maria Sharapova match.
Right.
And I was kicking myself the second I saw the draw, and I was like, that was going to be our night. We were going to go up. And
well, do it at some point, because as a fan of tennis, and that's the thing too, without the fans there, it would feel like a ghost town. Mm-hmm. And that was part of the cool thing, is that everywhere you look, first of all, everywhere you look, there's a match going on, and there's just people everywhere, and it's a beautiful facility. I was so blown away by it, and it's humbling to be. I mean, I wasn't calling any of the matches. I'm just doing sort of like, let's do a check-in with Mark Stern. He's out at court 17 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I'm at the U.S. Open, man. Like, it was really cool. Like, I don't think I've had that much fun professionally. Now, I also want to say this for folks that are like, well, that's the easiest job in the world. You just watch some tennis. What are you doing? It is also the hardest I've ever worked. They're incredibly long days and long nights, and I was in charge of the podcast that we had to put out at the end of every day. So that meant I couldn't do. I had to get there early, and I couldn't go until the matches were over because you can't sum up a match until it's done. So it was long days, but it was well worth it, and I'm not complaining. But it was the whole experience was just fantastic.
If we put the U.S. Open and the City Open aside.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another Grand Slam that you are sad to see that it's not going to be played? And I know there are only 3 others, but maybe also another tournament in general that maybe you've always wanted to go to, Indian Wells or something else that you're like, man, I'm really sad that tournament is not being played now.
It's funny you said Indian Wells, because I know that was one of the ideas getting kicked around, was maybe putting it on out there. I don't know why there is better than the facilities in New York. I would have to, it's a tie. And this is no offense against the Australian Open. I just don't fly like Tony. I'm not a great flyer. That's a long flight. I do want to get to Australia at some point, even though
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of weird stuff over there. There's like big jumping spiders. There's like all kinds
Oh
of weird
yeah. Oh
stuff.
yeah.
But I love the Australian people. Anytime you meet an Aussie, I feel a kinship with them because I'm like, all right, you guys all got kicked out of Britain, and we sort of just left. And we were like, we're like brothers, Yeah, and there is a friendship there between Aussies and Yanks. So I'd love to see that, but it's Wimbledon, the top of the chart for me. I
Mhm.
cannot die without going to Wimbledon. It's just such a special tournament for me. It's the crown jewel. I love the U.S. Open, and the memories you have of the U.S. Open are so sterling. And it's its own different animal, but it's Wimbledon. It's the dress
Yeah.
whites. It's the
Yeah.
bowing in front of royalty. It's just something cool. And then to see Roland Garros and to see the clay and just the magnificence of that, and hopefully I can see Nadal there before Nadal retires,
Yeah.
because let me tell you, that sport might get played for another 1,000 years, and there will never be a better clay court player than Rafa Nadal. He is
Mhm.
just an artist out there.
Mhm.
So, by the way, you want some trivia?
Okay. Yeah.
Nobody knows this, or very few people know this, and I love asking this question. Do you know where they get the name Roland Garros from?
No.
Okay, no, it's fine. You
No.
shouldn't.
No. I definitely don't.
Roland Garros was one of the first flyers. He was a French aviator, and he was a pilot in World War One. And when planes first were going around in World War One, they were observation things only. It was like, where's the other troops going? They weren't firing each other. If they did, it was with a pistol, and you never hit anybody. They couldn't figure out how to fire the guns through the propeller.
Mhm.
So, there was no combat in the air, essentially. And he got the idea. He's like, what if we put metal around the propeller, then we can shoot the machine gun through it. Some will go through because it's going fast. Some will bounce off, but it'll be okay. So he came up with that, and he started shooting down a bunch of German planes. He was one of the first French aces. He was shot down. He was captured. He
Wow.
escaped, and he went back to fly again. And very sadly was shot down and killed before the end of the war in November of
Mhm.
1918. But he's this French flying war hero.
Wow.
And again, Roland Garros, people probably think it's just a couple of
I thought
French
it was.
words.
Yeah, I thought it was like somebody who was maybe involved in tennis.
Right.
Like you would never know a Donald Dell if you didn't
Right.
know something specific, like with the U.S. Open. That's what I thought like a Roland Garros might be.
Yeah, no, he's this old French flyer, and I'm just, truth be told, I'm a huge fan of history,
Hmm.
and when I get interested in something, I pour into it, and so, but yeah, for folks, Roland Garros was an actual person, and he was a war hero for the French.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Wimbledon. That isn't a person.
no, it's a guy named Jimmy Wimbledon.
Right.
Yeah,
Jimmy Wimbledon. Someday I would like to go to all four the Grand Slams as well. I'm not as afraid of flying, but I
hmm
feel like to go to Australia, you kind of need to not just go for the tournament. That's probably like a 2-week trip.
yes, yeah, you got it. If you go, that's not a weekender.
Yeah.
That's not flying out to Vegas and playing some games and
Right.
come back.
I mean,
That's
you could do Paris or, Great Britain. You could do London, in like 2 or 3 days and come back, but not.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you absolutely could. And I've been to London once as a kid. I haven't
Hmm.
journeyed overseas all that much. I've actually driven across the country like several times. I feel
Oh,
like I've got a great
wow.
yeah, I feel like I got a great sense of the country as a whole. And there's nothing like driving through the country. You really
Yeah.
get a sense of everybody.
Yeah.
And so I've only been to London once. I've never been to France, never been to Paris, and I
Hmm.
just think it would be. I mean, it's come on, it's Paris, it's London.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd just be cool to go. And Australia. Oh my God, would that be fun? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. You got to go for a couple of weeks, I think.
And you drove cross country. Was it by yourself with a bunch of friends? Which way did you go? Because I went with my parents once, and we went north. I remember going through I remember sleeping. My dad was like, "We're saving money, so we're going to be sleeping in our station wagon." I remember falling asleep, looking at the St. Louis Arch, like as I
Oh
was
wow.
falling asleep. I don't know why I vividly remember that more so than anything else with the trip. That is it. But what was the reason for you traveling cross country?
Well, when I graduated from high school back in 1902, one of my best friends, and I know this is going to sound like a made-up name, he's one of my best friends, Clymer Bardsley. His real name is Clymer. Yeah,
What? That's
yeah,
really
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And by the way, also a tremendous tennis player. Like
Oh, really?
he kicks my butt. He's great. And he belongs to a club that has grass courts, and he invited me up. He lives in the Philadelphia area, and he invited me up.
Yeah.
So I got to play on grass courts once. I'm not kidding you. I actually almost hyperventilated. I was so excited to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So Clymer and I were, when we graduated, we said we wanted to drive across country. So we got in his old Volkswagen Dasher, and we drove,
Yes.
we
Yes.
went north. We went through Chicago. We saw a White Sox game at the old Comiskey Park. And
Wow.
we went up through Minnesota and cut through, I think it was South Dakota. See, I'm gesturing like people even know what I'm talking about. Such an idiot, I swear to God.
No, I did the same thing. I said you go up or down. You can go one or two ways. I feel like to see a lot.
But we saw the Badlands, which were stunningly, hauntingly beautiful. We saw Mount Rushmore, which, truth be told, was a little disappointing.
Is it
Because,
smaller than you think?
You're in this parking lot surrounded by a million RVs, and then way up in the distance is Mount Rushmore.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh. And I saw, I don't know if you remember, there's an old movie called North by Northwest. With
classic. Oh, yeah.
Remember they're running around the statues at the end? I was like, well, yeah, can't we go up and run around the statues? But the climber was like, you're an idiot. No. So then we cut down, and we had to make up time because we were picking a friend of ours up in Oakland. We went through Utah, and then
I did Utah.
Yep. And we went through Nevada, and we broke down in a little town called Lovelock, Nevada.
Oh,
now,
wow.
When we went through, this is 1987, Lovelock, it's just a nothing town. There's like nothing there. Weirdly enough, there was some Shriners parade going on. You know, the guy with the fezzes.
Yeah.
Tiny cars.
They wear the little cars. Yep.
Yeah, we're like, what the hell did we walk into?
Yeah.
What's going on? People might now know Lovelock because Lovelock is the home of a prison where one O.J. Simpson was sent when he was convicted. Yeah. So it was funny after the fact. We're like, oh, yeah, I've been to Lovelock.
I've been to Lovelock.
So we ended up having to leave our car there for a week, and we took a bus into San Francisco. We met our friend there. We went to see an A's game where one Reggie Jackson was playing.
Wow.
And we were chanting for Reggie the whole game. And, it wasn't a big crowd. The A's weren't that. It was before they went on that big run, 88, 89, 90, when they had the Bash Brothers. But we saw Reggie. We kept saying, Reggie, come on, man. Come on. Just say hi. Say hi. And we finally were like, come on, man. We drove with my buddies from New York. We're like, we drove from New York to see you. And he stopped. He started laughing, and he turned up to us, and he lifted his hat for us.
Yes.
Coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Then we picked our friend up. We went all around San Fran, which was really cool. San Francisco is one of the greatest cities. I love it to death. And it was my first time there. We saw Haight-Ashbury. We saw the Golden Gate, down Fisherman's Wharf, all that stuff.
So what's the street? Why can't I remember the name of it? It's like the Zigzag Street.
Oh
my gosh!
I should know, and I don't. I just remember Haight-Ashbury, where like all the hippies, like all that great music started. By the way, we'll both remember the name of that street.
To the podcast. As soon as we're done. Yeah.
My life right now. Kids, before there was a cell phone and Google, these things never got answered.
That's right. That's right.
Who hit 61 home runs? What was the guy's name? Was it Roger Marr? I can't remember now.
Yeah.
Every bar bet is settled instantly.
Yeah.
And then we drove back, through southern Utah, Bryce's Canyon, which is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And we wound up in Colorado. And for those that listen to the show, Tony's show, probably know I'm a big Grateful Dead fan. So we got to see the Grateful Dead perform there a couple of nights at Red Rocks, which is a beautiful amphitheater and an awesome place to see a show. And then we just kept cruising back, met up with our friend who lives in Ohio, and had some fun and then back. And it was time for school, man. It's great.
That's pretty cool. If everybody could just travel cross country once, I feel like it's a memory that you will never forget, because you were talking as if it literally just happened last week.
Yeah. Well, it did. I'm only 22.
It did.
But no, I think it's important. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, go to Europe and go travel and all this, for those that can. And honestly, man, I think it's so important to get in touch with the country that we live in. and to have a sense of the size of it and just the difference from where you go. And you remember that. You remember waking up in the middle of the night like it was
Yeah.
yesterday
Yep.
and seeing the arc. And
Yeah.
that's cool. When you see that, you're like, man, how did they build that? That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Actually, because when I used to work for the Wizards, I remember doing a story. We went to St. Louis to do a story on Bradley Beal, and that was the first time I've ever been back. And the one thing I wanted to do was go into St. Louis Arch because I didn't remember it as a kid, and I was like, this is the one landmark that's like etched in my memory.
Did you go up in it?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Was it scary?
It was definitely scary. I mean, because I felt like as a kid, I was like, when it goes up, it goes like stairs. That's what I felt like it was. But it was a smooth ride. You get up there. It isn't too crowded. It's almost like they do, they control the crowds, the number of people that could be in the top looking down. So it wasn't bad at all. I thought it would be a little more herky-jerky and I wouldn't like it and kind of like, I understand that some people have phobia, so maybe they can't go up, or if they go up, they like are really tense as they're trying to look down. But I felt very calm and comfortable and felt like I was on solid ground being up there. But it's beautiful, and not only is it a beautiful sight of St. Louis in Missouri, but most people don't know that across the river is literally Illinois. So that's like one of the jokes where it's like, hey, you want to go to Illinois? Just go right across the bridge and you're right there. So, that was kind of neat to see it. It was a fun trip, though.
That's
one
great.
I'll never forget. And luckily, I didn't have three brothers then, so it was just me. Ha ha. Yeah. But another thing I got to see, because you said you love baseball, and the fact that you mentioned 2 trips in here, I just want to let you know I did get to see Michael Jordan play baseball.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Wow.
Greenville Braves were the home team, and the Birmingham Barons were the away team. And seeing that bus pull into the stadium, I swear on one hit, he did the Jumpman pose in the outfield to catch a ball. I'm like, no, he had to do it because that's what it looked like to me. But it was pretty cool. I mean, it was a spectacle beyond belief to see the number of people there to watch him play baseball, wearing number 45, black and white. It was pretty cool.
Listen, I don't know why this dimmed in my memory. Maybe it's just the years, but watching Last Dance brought it all right back to me. And I'm not a Chicago. I mean, I'm not from Chicago. I love Wilbon, but I'm a Boston guy. I love the Celtics, and the Celtics have their own rich tradition. But I loved Michael Jordan. I rooted for him in those games like he was on the Celtics.
When he was putting 63 on the Celtics, right? You're like, go Jordan.
You saw what Bird said. He said that wasn't Michael Jordan. That was God.
Yeah.
Listen, it just brought it back. And no disrespect to those that want to take the case up for LeBron or anybody else. In my humble opinion, it's Michael Jordan and then everybody else.
Yeah.
And I love watching him. And about the baseball, it was fascinating to watch the inside stuff on that.
It was.
And hear scouts say, and not just scouts, Terry Francona, who helped me win helped my guys win a World Series. And in 07. To hear him say, oh, given a couple more years, he would have been a major league player, maybe a 4th outfielder or something like that, but maybe a starter. That's astonishing to me. That tells you what an amazing athlete Michael Jordan is,
Yeah, it really is. It was an amazing documentary. I had David Aldrich on, and I had the producer who came up with the idea to follow the team that year, Andy Thompson from Indie Entertainment. He was on a podcast too, and just hearing their stories just added to just watching it. Because like you said, just seeing the behind the scenes in the background was just kind of cool.
Do you remember? Well, I know you remember because you're sharp and you remember stuff, unlike me. The famous shot of Jordan where he's hugging the basketball. He's like face down on the floor after they win one of the titles.
Yeah.
You'd always seen that shot, but it was like a still shot. You never heard any audio behind it.
Yeah.
And then in The Last Dance, you heard the audio, and to hear him weeping, the emotional exhaustion that he was experiencing in the aftermath of what, was this huge accomplishment. You're like, oh my God, the toll that it takes on this guy is just frightening.
Watching his back go up and down, the heavy breathing between that moment and a moment that's more in the present was when he was crying after episode 7 and just said, that's it. Like, break,
Right.
because like
Yeah,
he
break.
he knew he was about to really break right then.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I'm an avid listener, as I mentioned already, of the Tony Kornheiser podcast. Wow, I can't talk. Um, what has the adjustment been like for you? Because I think the beauty of what you produce isn't just the podcast. And like you said, Tony's a big part of it, but it's you being in the same room with everybody. You're like a family the way you talk. And now you've had to break it up. How hard has that adjustment been to keep a safe social distance, but still try to have that element of what you have been producing in the Tony Kornheiser show since 2004 at WTEM?
Well, thank you, by the way, for listening and for supporting the show. It's not like a family; it is a family. Like I look on everybody on that show, and particularly Tony and Michael, as family. Like I genuinely love everybody on that. And unfortunately for listeners, sometimes the best part of the show is the stuff that you guys can't hear when we're all just busting chops in the studio and riffing, and then finally
Yeah.
Tony will be like, all right, come on, we gotta go. You know? And by the way, one of the great things, listen, I worked in radio for an awfully long time. And when Tony and Michael had the idea that they wanted to switch from radio to doing a podcast, there was a lot of uncertainty, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, if I wanted to do something else. And I'm so blessed and grateful and fortunate that Tony wanted me to be a part of this, to continue to be a part of it. And it's allowed us to grow in ways I don't think we could have grown in as a radio show. It's given us a little bit more freedom and to have fun in between breaks and be like, okay, because you're just taping stuff. You're not looking at a clock like, oh my gosh, we got to make our break.
Yeah.
So that's been fun, but I have missed everybody in that studio. Studios with Gary and Chris, I mean, it's really hard to not laugh the entire time. And we're texting each other throughout the show just to crack each other up, busting chops. And it's so much fun. And one of the things that we talked about, well, first of all, one of the great things about doing a podcast as opposed to a radio show is we really easily can do this from our different homes. So we're grateful that the technology allows us, just like we're doing this right now, that allows Tony to be from his place, for me to be in my place. We have an engineer up in New Jersey, Sean Cherry, who's just terrific. And I want to say thanks to all the folks at Cadence who have supported us throughout this. But without sports and with it being kind of a weird time, to back off to a couple of shows a week, you can do that as a podcast, and people are still thrilled that you're putting content out. Whereas a radio show, you got to do 5 shows. Come on, keep it coming. And I would have found that to be incredibly difficult to keep that up with nothing going on.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that we're in the medium. I'm also grateful. Michael Kornheiser at the beginning of this was with his in-laws down in Carolina. And so Tony was by himself in his place and I was by myself in my place. But when Michael came back, he was so excited to get back in there with Tony, and it has been great. It makes me feel better knowing the two of them are there and they're socially distancing across Uncle Benny's table, and I'm more comfortable with Michael being in there than I am with myself. I mean, I could put a mask on, but I mean, Tony is an incredibly active, vigorous man. And I'm not going to give his age out. I'll let others do that. But
Cindy Bourne.
Yeah, exactly. But he's in that age range where, like my parents are, where you have to be incredibly careful. Like, you want to be over there with them, but you have to understand, like, you could pick this thing up and bring it in unwittingly, and the next thing you know, they're infected, and it's a real danger for people of a certain age. But for Michael and him to be together in there, I think is fantastic. And it's really tough not having everybody in. But one of the things that we talked about doing from the jump was making sure that we have those voices as guests on the show. So we rotate through with all of them. And because I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you as a listener, I think it makes the show seem more like normal, and these are your friends and your family, and it makes it feel more comfortable for you to hear everybody. And come on, who doesn't love hearing from Gary and from Chris and from DA and Jeannie and Tori and Leon? I mean, it's just, there's such great folks and we all have such fun that I wanted to make sure that they didn't get lost from this
Mhm.
version of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, I definitely like being able to hear from everybody, and the fact that, because you have more to talk about. I feel like hearing what, not just their thoughts on the world in sports, but hearing just at their home, hearing Gary Braun talk about his kids and having them
Mhm.
go outside and do the yard work, because what else are they going to do? Like, it's like, oh, we're all kind of listening to each other and experiencing, this pandemic, and now the protests kind of together, and everybody
Yes.
sharing their different views of it, is very cool, and I do like it. Tony doesn't dole out respect, praise often, unless he really means it. And
Mhm.
for you to be with him since 2004 obviously means he respects you and appreciates you, and there's an admiration there for your craft. What do you think that is? How you two have hit it off and been together and had such a successful show for so long?
Well, a lot of people don't know this. Tony was in debt to a man named Vito Corleone, and Vito then asked him to repay the favor by hiring me. Um, no, listen, I was a big fan of Tony ever before I met him. Even before he got into broadcasting. When I moved here in 1982, reading him and Wilbon and Boswell in the Washington Post, I came from the Boston Globe, where
Mhm.
you had Bob Ryan, Dan Shaughnessy. Just a host of others that I'm not mentioning right now, but who were fantastic. You come down to DC. I'm sorry. This is the best sports section in America right now.
Wow, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and every time I read Tony, I'm like, damn, that's what I was thinking. How are you tapping into my head, old man? And he just has this way to connect with everybody, with humor, with gravitas when he needs it, and he always nails it, you
Hmm.
know? And so when we first got put together, um, listen, it was a thrill and it was an honor. And I always listen, all right, truth be told, I don't know if I was working out when the show first started. Um,
Wow.
well, because again, like you said, it's hard to earn Tony's
Hmm.
respect and get on the inside. And I was trying hard, but I didn't know if I was doing well. And then the Nigel thing came up, and we sort of created this character out of thin air. He had no idea that I could do voices, and he was totally charmed by that. And he literally, after we did I won't go into the whole story of it, but we sort of did this bit where Gary and I were doing a British accent, and we went big laugh, we go to commercial. Tony points at me and he literally said, "You can only talk like that from now on."
That
Mark
was it.
Stars used to exist, and Nigel was born, and he really loved. He knows that I'm like a little subversive, and he loves subversive stuff. And so we shared that. We also shared this unbelievable passion for music and a certain type
Hmm.
of music. And
Hmm.
he would be blown, be like, "How do you know this song?" And I was like, "Tony, my first job was at an oldie station. Like, I love this music. I know about it, not as much as you, but
Yeah,
one of the things I miss that we can't do in the podcast is I'll play a song to see if he can name the song, and invariably he always would because he just is like that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the thing that I've always tried to do with Tony is I've never wanted to let him down. I've always
Hmm.
been crushed when I have failed him, and I have failed him a million times over.
Yeah.
And I think I can't say what he's thinking or what he thinks of me, but I think what he sees in me is a guy that always is trying so hard. I mean, I really try and work as hard today as I did when I first started on the show.
Hmm.
And I think he sees that when I don't come through for him, that I'm just incredibly crushed because I just don't want to let him down.
Hmm.
And seeing somebody that cares about the product as much as he does, I think I think that's one of the things he really appreciates. And the times where I haven't screwed up, I've
Yeah.
done a pretty good job, and I've been able to navigate through all the different changes we've done on the station. And I think ultimately he knows that if he asks me to do something, it's going to get done.
Hmm.
And you're almost like a left tackle in that sense.
Yeah.
Just there's stuff. And listen, kids, if you want to know what a great producer does, I'm going to tell you right now. There's no one thing. What you need to do is find out what the person you're working with, what makes them comfortable, and then make that happen.
Hmm.
Because if they're worrying about a bunch of other stuff, they're not focused on the show. And what
Hmm.
you want all that worry to be gone. and so you're just free and easy and having fun and reacting on the show without worrying about a million different things. That's my job, is to freak out and worry about stuff behind the scenes and let him just be free to execute. And that's what I've always tried to do with any show that I've worked on, but particularly with Tony.
Yeah, and as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think the fact that you kept things the same, from old guy radio to the intro song before you read the emails at the end, even a routine, the Bethesda Bagels. Like every time he asks you to say, "Hey, talk about Bethesda Bagels,"
You
it's
know what
just
we forgot today? So let me give a shout out to Bethesda Bagels. We actually talked about it after the show, and I was like, damn it. And again, I was crushed. I was like, he's like, I
yeah.
got to remember that. And I was like, no, man, that's me. That's my fault. My fault. So Bethesda Bagels, I think it's 7819, might be 4819 Bethesda Avenue. They're open from every day from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
There you
And
go.
they have amazing bagels. They are fantastic. You'll love them. BethesdaBagels.com.
Yeah, there you go, a plug. Because I mean, it's just, you talk about how you're a family, and I almost wish you could go 2 hours and just start recording when you're getting there. Well, more back in the day, just start recording when you first get in there, because that's the juicy stuff. I mean, you have to do some kind of uncut podcast where you just save all of the stuff that didn't make it into the show and just put that out at like the end of every week, or a day like in the summer when Tony's not going to be doing a podcast. You and him are on vacation. You could just kind of have a bunch of this, stuff stockpiled.
See, my job is to make sure that audio never sees the light of day. That's my job. No, I know. And I know people say we should do more shows. We should do longer shows. But you got to leave the audience wanting a little bit more. Like, we
Yeah.
love the format that we're doing right now. And because it's a podcast, some days we can go short, some days we can go long. We can cut out a segment if we need to. I know,
Hmm.
and people want to know why we're not doing news, because it's really hard not to sit down with Tony before the show and go through. He comes through. By the way, he's the most prepared guy you've ever worked with.
Hmm.
He comes in with all his notes on his Washington Post. He's got every question written down that he wants to ask the people they're going to be guests on the show. He's got a bunch of news stories that he's seen that he wants me to do. I'll offer up a couple of things, but I always want to do the things that he's interested, because that's the stuff he's going to be most engaged in. But he is fully ready to do a show if nobody else shows up except for me and him. He
Hmm.
is, without question, the most prepared, most professional broadcaster I have ever or will ever work with.
Hmm.
And I know he's not effusive with praise with a lot of stuff, but behind the scenes, he's very good at letting you know you're doing a good job. He's
Yeah.
fiercely loyal to the people he loves. And I mean, I do consider him to be family. I mean, I've got a father who I love very much, but Tony is of a similar age to my father. I almost feel like he's my uncle. I
Hmm.
look up to him in so many ways, and he has taken care of me in a brutal industry. Broadcasting is just awful, and there's
Yeah.
some of the worst people ever that you go. And I've worked with a lot of them. There's just terrible people who will crush you and just stomp on you to get ahead or just for sport. And Tony is very old school. And when you're on his team, you're on his team. And I'm so grateful that we wound up together. And I think our sense of humor, the movies we like, the music we like, and just sort of the way we look at the world in a lot of ways is very similar. I think it's another reason why we've meshed so well
Hmm.
for so long.
How do you pick letters for Tony to read? Because you're the gatekeeper.
Short and funny, man.
That's
Short
it.
and funny. Yeah.
That's it.
And of course I say that, and then somebody will write in an email saying Hervé Villachez, and it's like, come on. Like, no, it's funny once, but I've seen it a million times. No, you just look through stuff that he's been interested in and he's having fun talking about right now. Like, he's really loving all these sort of like memory lane emails about growing up
Yeah.
on an island with a
Yeah.
dairy
Yeah.
barn and all these other
Yeah.
weird things.
Yeah.
So I look for those, and but really, the people that send in an email that's like really long, it's
Yeah.
just, you're like, we don't have time for this.
For the yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll set them aside and say, "Hey, this is kind of cool. I don't know if you're going to read it, but I wanted you to see it." You know.
Hmm.
So, but that's short and funny. That's.
How many David Aldrich moments, another, little Tony Kornheiser thing, do you have? Do people come up to you on the street and do they say Nigel or Mark more?
Well, actually, the beauty about playing a British character on the show is that nobody actually knows who I am. I ride through life pretty much anonymous. I mean, unless people already know who I am.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I'm not. Trust me, I'm not Tony. If I now, I will say this: I've gotten to be very friendly with the people at the Palm, and they love me there. In fact,
yeah.
my picture's up there too, which is totally insane. So I do get the star treatment when I'm at the Palm, but if I go anywhere else, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
So no.
Hey, the Palm is a good place to get star treatment. You
Yeah,
can't do much better than that in
love
DC.
the Palm. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I did not say this. At the very beginning of the pandemic, right around the lockdowns, right around, I want to say March 15th or something like that, the legendary Tommy Giacomo passed away.
Hmm.
And he was just the best. I mean, I love Tommy. For whatever reason, he loved me. Tommy was the general manager of the Palm forever and really welcomed us in there. And was anybody that knew Tommy loved him. He was just a character. They don't make him
Yeah.
like that anymore. And that was sort of like this unbelievably sad note right when we're entering into this incredibly sad period of time. So
Yeah, and the funny thing is, it's such a popular restaurant, but it's on like a side street. You know, it's not like on Connecticut Avenue with the glitz and glamour. If you know the Palm, you know DC. Like
mhm.
it's really hidden away, and it's one of the best gems of a restaurant
Oh
in
yeah.
the city. So
Well,
hopefully,
we have a yeah. Hopefully, it is open up soon. We have a dinner with the City Open crew, and
hmm
we used to go to a different place. And then after like 1 or 2 years, the guy that was running was like, "Is there somewhere else we should be going? What's like a true DC place?" And I said, "The Palm." And so now we're not probably going to be able to do it this year. I don't know if the City Open will get going or not.
yeah, yeah,
But every year we do it, we have our like just before the week starts, we have our team dinner at the Palm, and it's always fantastic. So,
yeah. Okay, you're from Boston.
mhm.
Please tell me that in some way you have either healed or you love that Brady and Gronk are in Tampa now. You're a Buccaneers fan?
No, I am.
Mark, come on, Mark.
And also, truth be told, because people the few freaks out there that know my bio fully know that I was an ardent Vikings fan for an awfully long time. I broke up with them, and
Hmm.
this was not a front runner thing. I had my friends from Boston literally lobbying me for 20 years to switch. And then
Yeah,
something happened with the Vikings. I got very upset, and I said I'm done with the team. And it wasn't they lost the game. I'm not going to get into it, but I was upset. I said I'm done with you, and I went to my friend and I said very quietly, I said, "All right, I'm going to come on board with the Pats." And he said, "This is great." He said, "If they make it to the Super Bowl, you're coming to the Super Bowl with us." I have two friends that have literally attended every Super Bowl the Patriots have
what?
gone to. Yeah.
Wow.
Great moments, some awful moments.
Yeah, the Bears, 1985.
Well, actually, that's the one they didn't see because they're too young. They're too
Okay,
young.
oh, okay, okay.
But I think starting with the Bledsoe one against
Oh,
the
okay, okay.
Packers, they've had
Yeah.
everyone. And so that was the year of the Seattle game. And we
Hmm.
were doing the show. We were still the radio show. We were doing it in Arizona. So that's where the Super Bowl was. So they're like, "We got your ticket. You're coming." And
Wow.
so I got to see the Malcolm Butler play live. And
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was
wow.
crazy. You had no
Yeah.
idea what was going on. It's great about football. You watch it on TV, you can see immediately what happened.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened? And then you
Yeah.
see all the Patriots running out of the pile with a finger up, and you're like, did we just, oh my God. It was insane. So I came into the Patriots fairly late in their run, but I still got to see and cheer three Super Bowls. I only went to one, but see
Hmm.
them win three Super Bowls, which was
Yeah.
insane in the game against Atlanta. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Falcons
wow.
fan. Oh my God.
Yeah.
How did you not win that game? Oh my.
Yeah.
Anyways, I understand why Brady wanted to go. I think it's a
Yeah.
very restrictive atmosphere under Belichick. Very successful, but
Hmm.
what you saw was Belichick was not going to bend his rules, even for Tom Brady, and not
Yeah.
give him an exception or cut him slack as a 42 or 43-year-old who had won 6 Super Bowls and been to 9 or whatever it is. You know, I think that relationship had run its course professionally. I think
Hmm.
there's still love and admiration with those guys. I'm not super thrilled that then he's calling up Gronk and Gronk's coming back. Because you know what? If Gronk had played last year, there's a really good chance they would have won the Super
Yeah.
Bowl again.
Yeah.
You're like, damn,
Yeah.
man, if you just play one more year, it'll be good. You
Yeah.
know, I think management and ownership, I think, made a decision that they didn't want Tom back, and so it's hard to blame Brady for that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a way to make it work, but listen, at some point, John Lennon went out of the Beatles, man. You're like, I
Yeah.
want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
Tampa is not exactly the place I would like him to go. Have you ever been
Mm-hmm.
to Tampa?
Yeah, I went to a Bucks game last year. My good friend Casey Phillips, shout out to Casey.
Mhm.
Her life has changed. She works for the Bucks. She's one of
Oh,
their
oh
on-air
God.
talent, and now
Okay.
she's like, yeah, this is completely changing my life.
Yeah.
It's been wild for her.
And I shouldn't talk too much smack about Tampa. I have been down there. For those that remember Courtney the Goddess, I went down and visited her a couple of times down there.
Oh, okay.
Just as friends, just
Just
as
as
friends.
friends.
We're still friends. I adore her. Just don't want to start any rumors.
Yeah.
Um, I love her. She's the best. And so I've been to a couple of games down in Tampa, and like they're gonna have fun.
Yeah.
But the way the Boston media covers it, it's like a guy who's reading his ex's Facebook posts. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just let him go. Let's see what this
Yeah.
kid Stidham has and let him go. I don't wish him too much success, but I wish them well. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, and who knows if where the football season will go at this point. I mean, basketball is trying to figure it out. NHL is trying to figure it out. Last question here. You
Okay.
mentioned that you got your first big break covering the Olympics in 1996.
Yes.
I worked in Atlanta. That was my first job at
Oh, really?
WGNX. And I remember being down there and not really appreciating what I was witnessing, that it was the Olympics. What was, and being in that city, not having to travel to an Olympics, right? The Olympics came to you. What
Sure.
were you doing there? What was that like? What do you remember most about that time? And I hate the thought that maybe what you're going to say is the bombing and the Olympic.
Well, that's the thing
There.
that sticks with you. That's the thing that sticks with you because it was such a, and really an historic event. Um, I was a production assistant for Atlanta Olympic Broadcasting,
Mm.
which basically meant I was a gopher. And, we did a bunch of different stuff. I would sit in the production truck during some games and you would get to watch, the director direct a game. And I had
Wow.
never seen that before. And it's really cool. Like, all right, ready, camera 3. All right, if they make the shot, we're going to go to camera 2. If they don't, go for a crowd reaction on camera 5. Like this guy, it's like an orchestra, and he's a
Yeah.
conductor. It
Yeah.
was. I saw a really good director. I have no idea what his name was, but it was like everything flowed smoothly, and it was really cool to see. I also worked security for the men's basketball arena.
Oh,
I
wow.
know me. If you see me, I'm about 5'0" like I'm not the guy you think is security, but we're checking people's
Yeah.
ID badges. And first of all, it was really cool to see those games. And I had never heard sound like that. It was in the Georgia Dome, and only half of it, because the other half was gymnastics.
Hmm.
And when the U.S. team was there and it got loud, I was like thinking to myself, I'm essentially on the 20-yard line here.
Yeah.
If this were a football game, I don't know how those guys can call a play. Could not, and you're
Here.
screaming in somebody's ear, and they're like, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Worst part about that was there was a coach from another team. He didn't have credentials, and we had no idea who he was, so we wouldn't let him on the court. And finally, somebody came over and like, he's the coach of the other team. We're like, hey, sorry, man. Gotta wear your badge, dude. Gotta wear your badge. And we also saw Muhammad Ali came out to one of the games, and that
Wow.
was unbelievably cool. Uh,
Yeah.
and for those that remember, that was the Kerry Strug year when
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she did the
She got
vault.
hurt. Yeah.
Her leg was
And
all her
yeah.
ankle was screwed up. Okay, so after she does that, we're working security. The basketball game was starting later that day, so we're there just making sure nobody gets onto the court. And you hear all this craziness going on over in the gymnastics side, which is right over there, but we can't see anything. And then there's this little runway between the two sides, and we see
Hmm.
this gurney getting wheeled out with Kerry Strug with a gold medal around her neck. And there was like 4 of us working security, giving our own private ovation. And
Wow.
to see this young girl who had just achieved this miraculous, unbelievably spectacular thing, like just us, it was
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really cool. So those are the things I remember. As for the bomb, I walked through the park literally about a half an hour before it went off.
Yeah, it was at what, Atlanta Olympic Centennial Park. I don't know why it's called Olympic Village. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it was where music was happening. Everybody was,
Mhm.
and it was a really cool. The whole scene was great. I loved Atlanta. It was a little too hot for me, but it was really, I loved the whole scene down there. And that happened. I was in a hotel. I was at the bar having drinks with some of the people that we're working with, and all of a sudden you saw I didn't know they were Secret Service until they all grabbed their like right ear and they're like, and then like 30 guys ran out of the building. You're like, what's going on? The next day, and I want to put this in perspective because the use of military, the National Guard, and the things I told you about, seeing the light military presence around the monuments, and it really was light. It was like a couple of soldiers here and there. Just really, that was it. The day after the bombing, I thought I was in Normandy Beach on June 6, 1944. I'd never seen military presence like that. They came in a massive way, and I was like, oh my God. And because you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
It was scary. Obviously, your heart breaks for the people that were killed in that and the people that were hurt in that. And poor Richard Jewell, who got trashed and accused of doing it and basically convicted in the court of public opinion. And then it turned out, obviously, that he had nothing to do with it. So it's funny. It's all mixed in together for me. And, you know, I just remember driving back, you know. I had this crappy little Ford Escort, and I was driving back from Atlanta, and it was just like, I can't believe that I just did that. And it was shortly thereafter that I got my first job in radio and was on my way up to New Hampshire to Lake Winnipesaukee. Yeah, so it was, but it was, I couldn't have asked for a cooler, you know, thing to be involved in to start my career on.
Yeah. We had another bonding moment just there, a David Aldrich moment. I had a crappy Ford Escort then too.
Loved it. Then
I had a red one that would leak so much, and I couldn't afford to change the. I guess it was the. I had to just put new oil in it probably every other day because I didn't have the money to get it fixed at the time.
Yep. Well, that's I was the same way. That's why we had Ford Escorts. You know, I love it. Yeah.
Mark, thank you so much. I wish you the best. Thank you for giving me so much time, and I will continue to be a fan of you and the show and everything you do. And thank you so much for being on.
This was such a treat for me. Thank you so much for listening to the show and being a supporter and being a good friend over the years, man. It's always brings a smile to my face when I run into you or when I hear from you.
Yeah.
You're just one of the good, as I've said, there's a lot of bad people in this business. You ain't one of them, man. You're one of the good ones. I also want to let folks know, in addition to Tony's show, the Tony Kornheiser show, you can listen to another project I'm involved in with the unbelievably talented and funny Adam Ferrara, the great, brilliant stand-up comedian. And he's a great actor. You know him from Rescue Me, Nurse Jackie, all these great things that he's done. And we are doing a show called the Adam Ferrara Podcast, and it's spectacular. It's a lot of fun to work with him. There's a guy named Phil, who's his writing partner, Phil Tagg. His wife, Alex, is on it. It's the four of us.
Wow.
And so it's the Adam Ferrara Podcast. It's a lot of fun, and I encourage folks to check it out. We have a blast doing it. I hope people enjoy it.
Okay, you got a new fan. I'll be definitely listening.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank Mark Stern for being a guest on the show. We wish him the best with the Tony Kornheiser Show podcast. Really, I'm a big fan, if you couldn't tell. We want to thank you for listening. I appreciate the support. Please leave a review, share it with others. If you're listening to it on podcast, you can get on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. And then you can also, of course, see the video right here on the Props Network YouTube channel. Please make sure to subscribe. That's it for now, everybody. Ciao for now.